we just watched. Hey guys, we just.
Got it out of order. Come on.
I did it on purpose. No, we're not. I don't want to do. We just watched Only Yesterday, and unlike one of the trends, well, not trends. I guess,
Or something we've been doing a lot.
something that's been happening a lot is we watch films that I've seen and Mark hasn't seen, and this is a film where Mark has seen, and I imagine you remember it pretty well.
Oh yeah, this is the third time I've seen it. I think.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. This is Studio Ghibli. I'm a big Ghibli nut. I've seen all the films except for the.
When was the last time you watched this?
I think 3 years ago, 2 years ago, something like that. Pretty recently.
All right.
Yeah.
This was my first time.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'll just say really quickly. I used to think of Ghibli's output being, when I first was watching the films, I sort of categorized it as Miyazaki and not Miyazaki. But especially recently, I've been able to really appreciate more of Iso Takahata's style and how he sort of differentiates himself from Miyazaki and the way he does things, which I've come to really, really appreciate and really, really fall in love with.
Are these the only 2 films he's done?
No, he's done more. I would say Grave of the Fireflies and this one are probably his strongest.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. The other 2 that come to mind, I could be missing several, but there's Princess Kaguya.
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 Tale of the Princess Kaguya.
That one I'm not. I like this film a lot better.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you seen Princess Kaguya?
I've seen Princess Kaguya.
Mm-hmm.
That one, as beautiful as the art is,
yeah.
And I can't blame the script because it is based on a folk tale. I found it way too depressing to ever want to rewatch.
Oh, really?
Because so much of what she goes through never gets fulfilled.
Yeah.
But that's just how the story went. So. Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of takes the departure from what his other films try to do, which is to sort of capture this slice of life. Kind
even
of
within
way of
wartime
storytelling.
and Grave of the
Yeah,
Fireflies.
and he wasn't really. He took a departure from that in telling a folktale.
Yeah.
So yeah, the other one though, My Neighbor the Yamadas, is a very interesting example where, it's an adaptation of a comic book. But yet he still tries to do something similar that in this film is like capture very small moments of family that are just kind of cute. But they're not nearly as significant as the moments that are in this film, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How fitting is it that this is the film we watched right after Arrival?
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. Both films deal with memory in very different ways.
Yeah.
But I don't want to go too deep into. But this film. Obviously a lot of it is dedicated to its flashbacks, but I think if Arrival had more fleshed out flashbacks like this film did, it might have been stronger.
Well, the purpose of the flashbacks and Arrival are very different from this film, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting comparison. That's just the last film we watched. Happens to be. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure though, because the flow of Arrival is so good, and the way it integrates its flashbacks, that I'm not sure if.
What makes you say that about this film, then?
Huh?
You say that it's that this film does that very differently. Which it does, but, I don't know. What are your thoughts on the film? I'm super curious.
I think this is up there with Grave of the Fireflies.
Nice.
Only My Neighbor Totoro. My Neighbor Totoro is the only Ghibli film that probably surpasses this.
Awesome. I knew you really liked this.
This is currently fighting with Grave of the Fireflies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which... right after he watched it, he for a very brief time considered that his number one film.
All-time favorite. But that's another film where, with a film like Schindler's List, maybe it's because it is what I've learned about wartime. It doesn't disturb me quite as much as something like Grave of the Fireflies, where it's so slice of life in what it does that how overbearing the film is, it's definitely Grave of the Fireflies. I think it's more technically perfect and more perfect in many ways than Only Yesterday, but I might like Only Yesterday more.
I might have to agree with you. Grave of the Fireflies is sort of it's almost become it has this very weird air about it because it's known as that film as one of the saddest films ever. because of what it deals with.
Yeah.
Yet this film is kind of able to do the same thing that maybe that film was going for instead of what it knows for. I mean, obviously, Grave of the Fireflies was not going for the same thing as this film, but like it captures sort of the same slice of life, wholeness of that Grave of the Fireflies also has, but it's a little bit harder to see.
Well, I don't think it's hard to see in Grave of the Fireflies.
It's maybe harder to talk about without the big.
Right. Well, what makes Only Yesterday special is that it's more relatable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the big thing.
Yeah.
With Grave of the Fireflies, you can imagine what you'll do in a wartime scenario.
That's a good point.
And you can criticize Seita's behavior. Some people don't like the decisions he makes.
Yeah.
But when your life is like, when you're not sure whether survival is a thing that can happen or whether the war will ever end, who knows what you'll live for or how you'll live. So, hey, Miyazaki's next film, How Do You Live?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that's so weird. It's so my Grave of the Fireflies phase was so weird, where I was just convinced that it was one of the most perfect and emotionally powerful films I've ever seen, but I just can't see myself rewatching it that often. Maybe partially because I want the film to remain special, but I think more likely the reason is just it takes so much out of me. And I recently read a Letterboxd friend's review of I can't remember what film it was. There's a film that he saw where he says, it was Arrival.
Oh, interesting.
He says that Arrival hit him so hard that it becomes such a burden for him to watch again. And because of that, he doesn't, or I think it's he doesn't, he didn't rate it that highly.
Oh.
Yeah. For some people, the rewatchability and how fondly they remember the film is something that's very important. Yeah. That's why that's why people prefer the E.T. and the Jaws as the better Spielberg films than the Schindler's List. This happens a lot on just list sites.
That's something I don't really consider myself, so that's interesting.
Right. I don't consider myself that either.
Yeah.
But with Grave of the Fireflies, right now it's like in the 50s and 60s of all time, which I'm still struggling with. I'm like, why is that film so low? But then every time I look at my list, it's that low. It's so weird. But anyway, that's enough about the other films. Let's talk about Only Yesterday. So, okay. How do I guess I should give a synopsis since it's spoiler free. So basically, I think the grown-up version of her is 27.
That seems about right.
I read a little synopsis. So 27-year-old, I forgot her name.
Do they even say her name? I guess they do.
They definitely say.
Oh, they say her name, yeah.
Yeah.
I've forgotten it as well.
Yeah. Bad memory with Japanese names. 27-year-old protagonist travels to the countryside to spend her summer, and she keeps on having these flashbacks of her in 5th grade specifically, just that year in 5th grade, and different anecdotes and little stories that made up her 5th grade, and all the awkwardness and all the childhood, the pouting, her family dynamic, her friends dynamic. And it is very moving, and I shouldn't reveal too much about how it's done, because I think that's a little spoilery. But what I can do is recommend some other films, and there is no other film I think that does it quite like this, but things that are similar. And I was actually going to ask you this. So we were originally going to watch 2 films tonight. Are you still down for another film after this?
Maybe. See how we feel after this, yeah.
Okay, so originally we were going to pair this with the Florida Project. But while watching this, I found another film in my head that would be a perfect pairing with this.
Oh, yeah?
Want to watch Cinema Paradiso?
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Okay.
You've told me a lot about the optimism of that film.
Optimism is a way to put it. I don't think it's like optimistic, but it is heartwarming.
Okay.
And it's particularly the first half of the Only Yesterday, where it focuses more on the protagonist's past, is very much Cinema Paradiso.
Okay.
Yeah. I haven't seen too much of Wong Kar-wai's work, but the slice of life and the way things play out in this film, it reminds me of Wong Kar-wai. And not necessarily In the Mood for Love, but more Chungking Express. Chungking Express is a film I saw once, and everyone worships that movie in terms of Asian cinema or Hong Kong cinema. I didn't quite get it, but some of the vibes I got in this film reminded me of Chungking Express, and I think you should definitely give it a shot. Yeah, Chungking Express is one. And when Marnie was there,
maybe. I mean, it's Ghibli. It's somewhat slice of life,
but
it's very, very different.
Right.
I would say of all of Ghibli's output, the one that's closest to this, I mean...
Totoro.
Yeah, Totoro.
Yeah,
Totoro.
My Neighbor Totoro. Yeah. But you've seen that. But if you haven't, go see it. It's my favorite. It's my favorite Ghibli film.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's the only one to crack the top 50. I'm not sure about this one. But yeah, Totoro is very high. Definitely my favorite of Miyazaki. Yep. There it is.
Yeah. With films that have flashbacks, sometimes, if it's like a series of flashbacks, and that's sort of like what the film is exploring, very frequently it's like, some flashbacks are better than others. In this film, every sort of very small antidote is so strong. Like, there's not one of them that's weak, really.
Every anecdote is an antidote.
Yeah, it's like... It's very well crafted. And also, I guess this is sort of a running theme in our films. I'm starting to see, like... Well, yeah, I guess I'll talk about that in the spoiler section, because that's a little bit giving away what this film does. But, yeah, I mean, I'm totally biased towards these films because I've seen them all, and I really love this style of filmmaking and animation. So, I mean, this is... Most Ghibli films are 5 stars just because they are, because of bias. And this is definitely very high up there of Ghibli's output for me.
I mean, this is 5 stars for me. If it hasn't been clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There has recently been an English dub version.
I know. The lady is voiced by Rey from Star Wars, Daisy Ridley.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. Someday I might watch that, but in general, English dubs of anime films, it just never ever feel right.
Well, you know the story with how Disney refused to release this. We'll talk about this in spoilers.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I don't know.
I told you about it, and like a year or two ago, and all you could say was, "Wow, that's just dumb."
Okay.
The reasoning.
Oh, I think I remember you telling me now.
It's a very specific reason.
There's a reason. Yeah, we can see if that's...
And now that I've seen the film, I can say it's very dumb. Because they don't even...
Yeah, it's dumb.
Yeah. They just mention a certain topic, and that's the reason Disney did not release. So Disney owned Ghibli. Or Disney owned the distribution rights of Ghibli to the States. Especially after, like, The Spirited Away, they kind of just bought the rights to that. And Only Yesterday was a film that took until 2016... To be released. That's why you get Daisy Ridley's voice, because she was a nobody until The Force Awakens, and they were like, "Oh, hey, you want to voice this? We're about to release this," and so she did. Wonder if she keeps her British accent. I imagine she does.
They all live in England now.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like Ghibli dubs go, I think this one could be okay.
Probably.
This one's probably not as grating as GG from.
Yeah, I mean, like, what Disney will do is they'll get very good voice actors to do these parts and, like, do the most faithful adaptation they can. But, I mean, just through the nature of dubbing, you're taking something that's so inherently Japanese and turning it into something that is not Japanese and making it appear like something that is not Japanese, at least on a language front. Like, it kind of works with stuff like it's passable with... maybe Kiki's Delivery Service.
But the cat.
But, I mean, the cat...
That was just terrible.
Yeah, I love the cat in the Japanese version. So, having the cat be totally different perspective in the English version, like... I remember watching the English version a couple of years ago, and eventually getting used to it like this. But it's like this is like a different character altogether.
Right.
Like because like the English version of the Japanese version of Kifi is like this annoying little like somewhat female, somewhat not like ambiguous character, and then the English version is what's his name?
I don't know who voices.
I don't know. I don't remember. But someone who's real snarky like this. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it gave a totally sort of almost sarcastic American vibe to the character, which the original did not have.
Which might benefit the language better. Who knows?
Well, it would benefit like American culture better,
Sure.
maybe. Which I mean, I don't know. It's sort of like colonization of these films, which just makes it weird. The one case where I thought it did not work at all was Princess Mononoke.
Really?
Yeah, because Princess Mononoke, it's set in feudal Japan.
Right.
And then everyone's speaking like English, and like it's these Japanese folk topics that they just do not go together at all.
Makes me wonder, like, if, for example, a film like The Pianist, where all the Germans and all the Polish people speak in English, how do Polish people and German people see that film? You know, like, do they accept it, or do they find it very jarring?
Yeah,
it's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, so for that reason, I mean, I always watch the subbed.
Well, with Only Yesterday, the biggest problem it could have is most likely, you know, the kids. How are they voiced?
Oh,
because the grown-ups can be okay.
Yeah.
And they most likely are.
Yeah, Ghibli always gets very good kid actors, or at least adult actors who sound like kids for their roles.
Huh.
Yes. So it's just harder to do that in English just because of how English is voiced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Oh,
one more thing about dubbing. In Castle in the Sky, originally there are unchanged voices for the kids. In the dubbed version, the kid sounds like he's like 14.
Really?
When he like with this changed voice that's deep. In the kid version, he's like unchanged voice.
Yeah.
It completely changed the whole tone in the movie.
Oh, like prepubescent.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, prepubescent. Yeah.
Okay.
Changed the whole tone in the movie.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
annoying
sure.
As hell.
It's weird.
Yeah. Lots of issues I have with that dubbing. They also changed the soundtrack.
Oh,
they added 30 more they mastered the soundtrack to make it sound professional because the original was like on synthesizers and like this just these not so great sounding synths, but then they reorchestrated it and made it sound like a modern orchestra and added more music. It completely ruins the movie in my opinion. Not ruins it, but makes it something that it never should have been.
I remember when we watched Castle in the Sky, you mentioned one specific scene where, like, in the English version there's music, but in Japanese version there's no music.
Yes.
I know which. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember that.
Okay.
That's very interesting.
That was a big tangent, but.
Yeah. Before we go into spoilers, I just want to briefly mention the art style and how fantastic it is.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way that the parallels between, so there are kind of like two worlds. There's the real world
the present world.
The present world where she's 27, and then the past world where she's in 5th grade. The 5th grade world has these muted colors, and you can always immediately tell what world you're in based on.
Yes.
It's a little bit more faded, and there are times when they mix together, and it's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to go more deeper into it once we get into spoilers.
Yeah.
But highly recommend this. If you're a fan of anime, if you're not a fan of anime, this could be a film.
This is a great entry-level film. I agree. Especially if you're into this style of filmmaking. That's because this is not a style that is unable to do in live action, but the animated style here takes advantage of what animation specifically can do in this style and makes it something that live action cannot. Yeah. So like if you're a fan of like Ozu or
not as much like, Ozu, although
Ozu is a very specific example. But,
in a way, it does kind of. I feel like if someone's already into Japanese cinema, though.
Yeah, if you're into Ozu, you probably know about
what's
something like Boyhood, maybe.
Something like Boyhood, or maybe a little Call Me by Your Name.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. What are other good examples?
What are slow films where people just. Kings of the Road.
Oh yeah, sure. Let's see all the
if you're into old Wim Wenders films, you probably know that anime is a good genre of film as well. I think that's.
Oh, not always, you know, but yeah.
Well, yeah, not always, but I think that's enough recommendations. Like, go see the film.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Yeah. Okay, spoiler time.
All right, spoilers.
All right, so I think with a film like My Neighbor Totoro and most of Miyazaki's output, the art style is like a combination of the 27-year-old world, the realism of the 27-year-old, particularly in like the lighting and the shading, because in the real or present world in this film, the lighting and shading are so stark and realistic. And that's something I'm not used to in Ghibli films in general. Mm-hmm. While in the fifth grade world, not only are the colors more muted, but some of the lines, they disappear on the edges. Mm-hmm. So it's not just color. The whole thing just almost feels like a dream. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just seems like most other Ghibli films, the art style is a combination of the two. Leaning more towards the realistic part, though. But I feel like something about the watercolors and the very clear shading of this film sets even that world apart from most other Ghibli films. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And other...
Now that I realize it, it's something that's very similar to Princess Kaguya.
Princess Kaguya. Yeah. Princess Kaguya. That focuses on one style, and it's more of an old Japanese type of painting. Like I don't want to say calligraphy because that's for characters, but it's during that era, the old era of painting. And but here it's more watercolors, which the style is different, but it's definitely cool to see Takahata's I don't want to say experimentation, but like use of different art styles to help tell his story.
And the moments when they mix together is really interesting. Like it's not anything too out there, but it's like I didn't imagine my 10-year-old self to come with me, and then she runs by on the train and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right.
And her muted color self in the real world. Yeah.
Some very odd parallels, and this doesn't actually mean anything. I just think it's a total coincidence, but this is funny. So the very first shot of the film we see after the credits is a giant skyscraper moving up. That reminded me of a film, you definitely haven't seen this, but for all of you out there, that reminded me of the beginning of Hitchcock's North by Northwest, in which totally unrelated, in which the opening credits show up as reflections on a building. And that's Saul Bass's good work, because Saul Bass is still the greatest title screen animator who's ever lived. If you've seen Psycho or Vertigo, all those were done by him. But so I'm like, oh, what an interesting parallel between this and North by Northwest. And then later on, she's in a train, and that train looks like the exact same one as North by Northwest, where they're trying to find Cary Grant's character. Like, it's literally the same narrow hallways, and then people are like peeping out the doors, like, oh.
You know, with the number of... There were a few references in this film that I recognized, or at least I wonder if that's somewhat intentional. Ooh. I mean, it could be a coincidence, but...
That's a weird one. That'd be so odd, because North by Northwest is a film about, like, a dude who accidentally gets mistaken for, like, this FBI agent. No. And he goes on, like, this wrong man adventure where everyone's trying to get him.
Well, it could just be, you know, even subconsciously Takahata just being an admirer of Hitchcock.
It's possible.
And sort of those ideas seeping their way into his films.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it could be like
just totally
not even Takahata, but like one of the set designers or something.
Yeah, possibly.
The
storyboard
artists.
Yeah. I think something that's really cool is the way the timing of each flashback. Because at the beginning, it's more about past protagonist. And then there was this big chunk where it returns to her present, and they decide to really flesh out who she is in the present. So after she goes off the train station and meets the person's cousin / possible love interest in this film, which I also like how that's done.
Me too. My memory of it was kind of skeptical because
Mm-hmm.
I remember, they only know each other for 10 days and then they potentially get married. And thinking that was kind of weird at the time when I first saw this. But looking back, I realized, wait, that's maybe not what happens. Because, like, she comes back, but they never say anything about, they get married
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it just means she comes back and that's it.
It's also the you see the granny is a character you barely even see in the movie. The granny, by asking her if she wants to get married, that immediately adds depth to her character and her generation.
Yes.
And how, her aging, and she wants more grandchildren.
The grandmothers in this film, I mean, this goes for all Ghibli films,
Yeah.
but in this film particularly,
great old ladies.
There's some great old ladies.
Yeah. I must look up her name. This is bugging me. I want to be able to say her name when I. But anyway.
The protagonist.
Yeah. Let's go back to what was my point before we. Oh yeah, the way the flashbacks are, the timing works. Also, the title "Only Yesterday." I swear it's reference to a Carpenters song, but
really,
yeah, because that's a song about Well, okay, the song doesn't really matter. I think just to market it to Western audiences, it's like A Brighter Summer Day.
Yeah.
The Chinese name for A Brighter Summer Day is the killing incident on Guling Street, the murder on Guling Street.
Oh my gosh.
But it uses the Elvis song as...
Yeah. And the English translation you caught on was The Falling of Memories or something?
It's called Memories Come Tumbling In.
Yeah.
The correct translation of the Japanese title.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on. No, not lyrics. I just want to see the name of the character. Taiko.
Taiko.
I think they pronounce it as Taiko in the movie.
Taiko, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we get this big portion where Taiko reaches the countryside and has this first long conversation with potential love interest dude, and there was a brief part where I'm like, wow, is this working for me? It's a little bit slow. But then when the next flashback occurred again, it made me realize how much I missed the old her.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, in the second half of the film, the parallels between the present day Taiko and younger Taiko really come together better because she's able to tell these stories to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved how the first half, it's just these memories flooding in. It's literally just these memories tumbling in. And they might not necessarily be exactly parallel to stuff that's happening in present day. But...
Well, nothing's happening in present day yet.
Yeah, that's
except
true.
for just, like, riding the train and stuff.
That's very true.
Yeah.
But there's something so nice because by the end of the film, you get a full picture of who she is. And it's not about this event reminding her of this event, even though second half it seems that way. But it's just crafting a character through her memories. And I like how not tight and somewhat sloppy it is. Because that's what life is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, something that when there's like two things going on, a very common narrative thing to do is to go up to one story until it gets really exciting, then cut it off, and then start telling the other story.
Yeah. Naruto.
Start telling the other story right when you want more of this story, and you switch it, and then you keep going, so that when you make the switch back, you're like, oh yeah, I have a reason to want to go back to the last one. So that it's a constant thing of the two stories sort of battling each other for your attention. In this one, they sort of just work together, and like each one is its complete arc. So by the time you're finished with one, you're ready to go back to the next one. Not because like it cut off at a moment where like you wanted like on a cliffhanger or something, but just because like that's just the natural flow of the film. That's much harder to do, but this film does it very well.
It's much harder to do, and even with this film, I can see potentially some people not connecting with it.
Yeah.
And not being a fan of the way the story meanders and doesn't give you those, the classic build up to this moment and then do the flashback. Like the fact that it's much, both arcs rely mostly on themselves, and the fact that it's a little sloppier and it's not like tightly interwoven. I mean, it is because it is the same person. But it's done in a much more realistic way and I don't even want to say poetic, because this film is poetic in its real way. I mean, in its own way, not in its real way. But just the more mainstream, like something that's not, the fact that this film doesn't do it in a more mainstream way. I think it's very bold, and I think if it works for you, it works so well.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and the way it portrays childlike awkwardness.
Oh my gosh.
Just like the way she reacts to things.
It's perfect. It's so
the
well
reactions.
done. It's arguably better than Ghibli. I mean, than Miyazaki.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this film just takes the realism like so far.
Mm-hmm. And even comparing with Grave of the Fireflies again, these are two films where the animators have the benefit, have an advantage because they're creating the characters' movements via drawing and via animation.
Yeah, which is much harder to do with a child actor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why there's a live action adaptation of Grave of the Fireflies that I probably will never watch. I will watch someday, probably due to curiosity. But yeah, I can't imagine. I can't even think of like the specifics. I loved how she had a acting phase when she was younger, and then how that played out. And I love how she's forgiving of her father so much, because her father, there were times when her dad was just being mean, being just a very stern dad.
It's very complicated.
Yeah, but the way she's able to forgive him, and just see these revisit these stories with mostly like a smile on her face. There's something so nice about that.
Yeah, like it would be very common for this type of story to be like about resentment towards how things could have been better. Right. But instead they're just like happy memories about things that were kind of sad but at the time, but like she just sort of smiles at and laughs back at now.
Yeah. I just realized the very first time we get more of the present day, that big change where I'm like, oh, I wasn't a fan of at first. The last thing she says in the voiceover narration was about the butterfly in the cocoon. And so it's more about Butterfly her. But what I like about it is that transition is perfect, but Butterfly Taiko still has stuff to learn.
Yeah.
And this film doesn't portray Butterfly Taiko as perfect. And she's not just looking back. I mean, some of it she might seem a little... She was like, oh, haha, I was so young back then. But she's also learning from young her a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then at the end, it's young her that sort of makes her go back. It's very heavily implied.
Yeah.
Like young her dragging her by the hand to take the other train and all that. Yeah.
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 Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, they come together at the end in a really beautiful way.
Yeah. Oh man, the ending credits is so good. The beginning of it. Yeah. That could be one of my all-time ending credits, because it's exactly. I mean, we've seen young Taiko and present day Taiko come together briefly in.
Yeah.
Throughout the film.
So it's like it's not breaking the logic of how the film.
No,
works.
but
it just takes it a step farther.
Oh, it's a step farther, and it's exactly with the music, with the main story being over. I think that's exactly what the film needed.
Yeah.
Just get a little bit more lofty and a little bit more figurative, a little bit more metaphorical, and just give us some really juicy imagery.
Yeah, and the stuff like the way the kids interact with the real world, like it's similar to something that Satoshi Kon would do, where like the kid like lays down in front of the running dude.
Oh yeah,
makes him trip, like stuff like that. Like, oh, I understand what happens in real life.
Right.
But like.
Right. Yeah, something else that's really impressive is the fact that a lot of the other kids, the side character kids, they don't get that much screen time. But at the very end, when we see all the kids together, there are specific characters where I'm like, oh. Like, I just see them.
Recognize you.
I just see them as real people. Like, oh, these are people from her past.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's just so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and despite, like, they don't really flesh out a lot of the minor characters, because these are all anecdotes about her. But, like, we know the sisters pretty well. We know the parents really well. We know certain school children very well. She has, particularly the person who had the period stuff.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay, so the reason Disney decided to not distribute this film, I originally thought that she sees herself get her period.
No,
but no, they just mention it.
They just mention it, and it's a topic in one of the anecdotes. That's all.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's Disney being overprotective of. It's
like you can have sea monsters eating people in Pirates of the Caribbean, but you can't have just innocent talk of periods.
Yeah, it's kind of shameful.
So who cares if, like, let's say an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old, stumbles on this film and like learns about periods through this. I don't think that's nearly as traumatizing.
I want that for my kids.
Exactly.
I would love that for my kids.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, they would be a little confused, but it'd lead to a really healthy conversation about
exactly.
it. Exactly.
Yeah. Mad, angry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's all we're going to talk about that. That was a very short conversation.
I mean, there's not much to say, because it's, like, undeniable that it's just a dumb move.
I guess it just shows what American, like, Hollywood finds taboo.
Yeah, it's...
Yeah.
I mean, it's another thing because, like, it's a kid's film. And there's the only way this would be distributed is as a kid's film, because that's what Ghibli's known for, is family films. And
this isn't really a kid's film. I think kids might be bored by this.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not because of how Disney has sort of set up the brand of Ghibli.
Right. With Spirited Away.
Yeah, people expect Ghibli and just animated film in general from the studio to be sort of like kid-friendly films. You don't come to think of it, the only movies... Well, I guess it's Mononoke. But... Yeah, I take that back. Yeah, I was going to say something like the most Ghibli films are like films that are known to be sort of like family films. But yeah, Mononoke is sort of the exception.
I would say Porco Rosso isn't necessary. I mean, it can't be a family film.
No. I don't mean to say that. Like, all of Ghibli's output, there are definitely films that are not really just for, like, kids.
Right, of course.
Because there are so many things that can be appreciated by older people.
Yeah.
And are kind of... Yeah, I mean, like, you can get a certain appreciation from them as a kid, but to really fully, like, understand them and appreciate them, in my own view, you have to be a lot older.
Yeah.
Yeah, to really get the full... understanding of that, of what they're going through.
Yeah,
they're very deep.
I just remembered one of the reasons I keep on bringing back the first time it fleshes out the present day Taiko. One of the reasons that really didn't work for me at first was because they just talk about farming technique for like 10 minutes.
This is so interesting because like the protagonist's love of farming, I couldn't care less about farming.
Right.
But this film makes you care about farming.
Exactly. Like by the end of the film, awesome. I'm like, of course they're gonna have this talk, and you can see how well they get along together. The boy, the man, and the woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's I wouldn't say this is the most ideal family film. It would say it's a little slow. It probably...
Yeah, if you brought your 6-year-old to this, they'd probably get bored.
Yeah.
Bring your 11-year-old or 10 or 9-year-old if they're really into film.
Yeah.
Heck, I should listen to my 9-year-old.
Really?
Yeah.
Did she like it?
What?
Oh, you
it
would...
implies I would show this to my 9-year-old.
Oh, I thought you meant like your niece.
No. No.
Or like some family member. No, I know you don't have a daughter, Mark.
No.
I know.
No. Yeah, I believe my niece has seen like Totoro and like.
I mean, Totoro's different. Yeah. Totoro.
Yeah, my sister has good taste in movies, I think.
Good. Keep on training her.
What? I mean,
gotta watch Celine and Julie go boating. There's this Letterboxd review in which one of the users took their 9-year-old to see Celine and Julie go boating because even though it's a French New Wave film, it's a film that is so innocent and it's so clear in the way it expresses lightheartedness that the 9-year-old was laughing throughout this 3-hour and 15-minute long movie. That's good parenting.
We gotta watch this, man.
We gotta watch this.
This.
Yep.
Yeah.
If we find this movie boring, then we're not even...
That means
that 9-year-old...
That means the 9-year-olds and ourselves have died.
Have died, exactly. Yep. Okay, there's one more big point that I kind of want to bring up, and I don't think we'll talk about it for too long. But something that really freaked me out about this movie were the dimples, and the way the characters.
Oh yeah, that's Takahata being kind of playful and sort of almost being parodying the typical anime style.
Right.
Yeah.
Because anime style, if you're young, you have no wrinkles at all. If you're old, you're full of wrinkles. And
oh wait, do you mean like just in general?
yeah, like when she's smiling.
Oh, all the time.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you meant like when she would get all starry eyed and.
Oh no, that's fine. I understand that.
Okay.
We could talk about those scenes too, but like, yeah, whenever she smiles, she looks like someone who's at least beyond her 30s.
I wasn't even aware of that.
Really?
It totally came across as
I've actually read something before that they actually deliberately tried to make it more realistic because they had the voice actors act before they did the animation. So the mouth movements.
Yeah, that's atypical for anime.
Yeah. Mouth movements are even more. They're very, very syllabic and specific to the Japanese language, which makes the dubbing even more interesting.
Yeah, it makes the dubbing harder because, this is the case for all Ghibli films because their dubbing is, the way their mouths move is a lot more than just the typical, low style, just open frame, closed frame mouth.
Yeah, but it took me a while before I got used to it, and I think that's so interesting because that is a trend in anime to have like the young people look just like pure as just nothing. And by being more human or like trying to animate it to make it look more human, it risks looking a little old. But that's just because of what I was accustomed to. I know you didn't have the same feeling at all.
Yeah.
But for me, that's something that actually popped out. So
speaking of what you're accustomed to, there were several times during this film where you were like, yeah, that was totally what I was like when I was a kid.
Oh, wow, I can't believe I almost forgot to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so from 5th grade was the year I moved back to China too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
5th grade to 9th grade, I was in China. And I went to a Chinese private school, but the classrooms were very much like that. And it's interesting to see how Japanese schools and Chinese elementary schools are so similar. Yeah. Down to like the way points are. Yeah, so basically you always you know the 100 emoji, the 100 points emoji. I don't know, is that an American thing too, to put the two lines below the points?
It's a thing to like to what my school would do is they would circle it.
They would circle it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, in China it's always the two lines. But in China they have like a certain word that means A, B, C, D, E, but it's not quite the same as the American system of A, B, C, D, F. And so when they said she got a D, I think that actually was more like the Japanese system. But that was the best that the subtitle translators could do it.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah. But the way the classrooms, like every classroom had a number, and so how it would work is every numbered classroom would have a main teacher. The main teacher would teach one certain subject, but they would be like sort of like the leader, the head teacher of the room, of this classroom. And so different head teachers would go just to, like, for example, if my head teacher were a Chinese teacher and another head teacher would be a math teacher, those two teachers would switch just to teach one class to give each respective class the Chinese and math class that they required.
I see.
But then in between breaks, the head teacher would always go back to the respective classes, ask, how have you guys been doing discipline-wise? Some have been running in the hallways, etc., etc. So it just hit it. And another film that kind of hit it was A Brighter Summer Day, but that was only the first half of it. And then they focused on the school student gangs, and I was like, I don't know what this is. But yeah, if you have any background in like schooling in Japan and China, and if you've since then moved on to like a Western country, I think watching this film will bring you right back to those times. And you might have even a similar experience from Taiko.
Yeah, I mean, even as a person who grew up in a Western country, there were still things I was able to associate with, even though like it's different gender and all that.
Yeah.
Like it's like.
Well, the point isn't really the gender, except for the period part. Obviously, the battle of the sexes.
Yeah.
But the way it portrays battle of the sexes.
Yeah, it's very
elementary school.
Yeah, it's very elementary school. Battle of the Sexes.
It's so elementary school.
Yeah. There's like the boys' club and the girls' club.
Yeah. I wonder if, people were to go about, especially American filmmakers, if they want to go about making something like this nowadays.
It would be very different.
It would be very different. And the elementary schools today are very different too, in what they're being taught.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I don't know too much.
What are elementary schools like right now?
I don't know.
With the parents that we have today being like a little bit more like socially open than our parents were.
Yeah.
Like, man, those kids must, and with technology, like, probably a lot of them have cell phones.
Yep.
Yeah, that's.
Yep. I think in 10 years, we'll look at the next generation and be like, my, what have they done?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoa, what an interesting detour. Yeah. This makes me look back to my childhood and be like, yeah, those were the good days. Even though I dread thinking back to my childhood.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I thought it was really weird. But,
my childhood's kind of weird too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. That's only yesterday. Is there anything else you want to say?
Man, I love this is the first film I've seen of Takahata since he died.
Right. So he passed away.
Yeah.
April? May?
April 5th.
Okay.
April 4th.
Okay.
I know that because I made a tribute video for Steve Gunner.
Yes. Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I'm okay talking about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go look that up if you want to know what it is. Anyway.
Yeah.
But rest in peace. I will watch more of his stuff. I'm very curious to see what you call the lesser Takahatas.
Yeah, I mean, lesser just in my own opinion of how I enjoyed them, really, because, I mean, this is probably my favorite Takahata film.
Yeah.
Grave of the Fireflies is kind of a complicated case for me.
Yeah.
Because of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I love this film. It's great.
Me too. Okay.
Okay, I think that's it.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.